Wuthering Wave's power balancing is really impressive. I feel like Kuro does a great job of keeping older units relevant, and today I'd like to explain why I feel that way. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. First off, Nightmare Echoes. Take Gion for example. He's extremely straightforward to build, and on its launch, we already had access to his best installed second salt teammate. That being Mortefi, who has run both of his previous banners. So Kuro considered him to be complete on launch. All of his best gear was up for grabs, and his primary echo set wouldn't be improved upon anytime soon. However, an unknown variable entered the picture, those being Nightmare Echoes. Nightmare Affiliate and Berengal was a neat buff to Gion's convenience, even though we had every reason to believe that Kuro wouldn't touch him again. With the old Affiliate and Berengal, you needed to hit the enemy to receive its buffs, which might not happen if you don't land the second hit from swapping out too fast, which is what provides the buffs. The new one is a summon, therefore requiring no field time, while also providing its buffs unconditionally. Other 1-point dex characters got buffed in this way too, such as Changli receiving Nightmare Inferno Rider, and both Shangli, Yao, and Kalcharo receiving Nightmare Thundering Mephis. I mean, Kalcharo's meta position is still a brick, dare I say that it's even the whole house, but with that being said, these echoes were a cool way to touch on kits of older characters, even after Kuro seemingly finished everything that they wanted to do with the unit. It makes me hopeful for the future, as they may very well introduce other forms of accessible upgraded gear in the future that may benefit older units. I'd also like to talk about new echo sets in general. Take Yinlin for example. She's one of the most signature-reliant characters in the entire game, and is extremely difficult to recommend to most players if you're not planning on pulling for String Master as well. However, the introduction of 5-piece Empyrean Anthem made playing signatureless Yinlin a whole lot more justifiable. Sure, it didn't suddenly turn her into a must-pull, and it's not really a buff that turned her into a character that I would actively recommend to people, as I'd unironically advise towards pulling for String Master first, before even remotely considering getting the character that it was intended to be used on. However, it's great for people who had already pulled for the character back in 1.0 that might have felt like she wasn't all that useful in their accounts anymore. Juja also got buffed for Empyrean Anthem, even if it's only barely better than Moonlit Clouds on her when considering an entire team's performance. But for people who have a good 5-star weapon for the character, or have her built up well, having Empyrean aid her personal damage is a really handy increase. Kuro has also literally went back and changed an old kit before, for the purpose of making the character usable. If you're a Phoebe enjoyer, then you know who I'm talking about. That's right, Spectra Rover. Before Spectral Frazzle got added to the game, Spectra Rover had next to no reason to be used. Havoc Rover was all the rage, and for good reason. He was a very powerful unit that was entirely free. There was no reason to choose Spectra Rover over him. Like, when I say that the kit was useless, I mean it. Genuinely. I don't think there was any situation in which you'd go, man, I bet Spectra Rover would really help me out right about now. You get the idea, he sucked. However, Kuro noticed this, and instead of leaving the poor guy to remain without purpose, they went back and slapped Spectral Frazzle mechanics into his kit. Yep, now he's the only consistent free-to-play applier of an Element's DOT mechanic that we currently have. I made a point to say only instead of best, because it's not like bro has any competition in that field, but Kuro did indeed go back and add something useful to his kit, so he's no longer just a random crusty unit that nobody would ever touch. Phoebe's a really strong unit too, so it's realistic that a good chunk of people would be utilizing him. This is significant because it means that Kuro is acutely aware when a character doesn't have any use cases. They went back and lifted him out of the ashes. And while not everyone may feel the effects of that right now, as the only Spectral Frazzle DPS we currently have is Phoebe, in the future as we get more of them, those who didn't pull for a good Spectral Frazzle sub DPS like Phoebe ironically enough, will really start to appreciate Spectra Rover. His viability as a free-to-play Spectral Frazzle applicant has been permanently set in stone. I don't think this is something that Kuro is going to do super frequently. It made sense for Frazzle since it was a brand new mechanic, and had they not added this to Spectra Rover's kit, then DPS Phoebe would have been basically unusable on release. Also, everyone and their mother has Rover, because they're literally the main character of the game, so it was a neat buff that every player could utilize if they wanted to get Phoebe. Yet with that being said, it's still credit-worthy. Kuro has shown that they will go to such measures, and in doing so, they transformed an utterly useless unit into a pretty solid one. New game modes also do a lot for characters. I understand that most people don't exactly have very positive feelings in regards to Whimpering Wastes. It's not exactly got a status as a beloved endgame mode at the moment. However, it's still a frequently resetting endgame with meta relevance, so I do think it's still important to talk about, especially when it has such a large impact on the meta value of certain characters, even if most folks aren't particularly a fan. New game modes like WuWa allow an entirely different meta to thrive. Older characters such as Gion suddenly shot up to become S-tier picks in this mode, because it's more so all about dealing with trash mobs consistently, as opposed to trying to blast out the strongest hits possible in the quickest amount of time. No limited 5-star DPS in this game is truly bad. I should absolutely state that now. However, Gion was on the lower end of a limited 5-star DPS power spectrum. He was still clearing well in TOA, of course, but a truly AoE game mode like WuWa allowed him to absolutely thrive. So now he's returned to being a highly valuable pull for most players. Because even though we have stronger options to deal with TOA, Gion remains as being a highly formidable Whimpering Wastes unit. Roshia's value as a character was in the dirt during her release banner too, because Sanhua exists. You really didn't have much reason to get the Clown Kid, unless you were trying to seriously min-max your Camellia team, or if you wanted to free up Sanhua for someone else. But as it stood, she was just not worth the limited pulls that it would cost to obtain her. WuWa did so much to save her value, because the content favors her excellent grouping wonderfully. Her kit gained way more value, and now there's an actual reason to pull for her. This video is focusing on pre-2.x units, but it'd be kind of criminal of me to talk about how Whimpering Wastes was a huge value boost to characters, then not discuss Roshia's case at all. Camellia was already really good, but her TOA performance was still behind the likes of Jinchi, Carlotta, and Phoebe. She's still an absolute TOA powerhouse, of course, don't get it twisted, but with that being said, Whimpering Wastes was yet again a lovely boost to her pull value. She's one of the best characters to deal with that game mode, featuring amazing AoE attacks and working wonderfully in multi-wave. The introduction of this game mode turned her from being a great pull to an utterly splendid one, because now she's able to cover for multiple endgame scenarios to a very high degree of effectiveness. My beloved Changli saw huge buffs through the introduction of this game mode too. Dual carry teams are amazing in WuWa because there's always damage being dished out to deal with trash mobs. And what do you know? Changli has the blood of dual carry flowing through her veins. She's literally an insane pull to make for this game mode. I doubt that Kuro was done cooking new endgames. We can probably expect to see far more in the future, which will buff particular units wonderfully. It's a good way to introduce a new way to play, which always keeps things fresh. Of course, I know that Whimpering Wastes isn't really everybody's cup of tea, but you can clearly see how WuWa really increased the value of certain units. I'm personally really happy with how Kuro managed to keep Gion in the loop. I like the character a lot, so seeing him be S tier in value again in a certain aspect of the game brings a smile to my face. I decided to leave this particular point for last because, well, it's just a bit obvious, isn't it? New characters. The addition of brand new units can seriously aid the meta value of a character, whether that be through granting them a new powerful synergy, or through acquiring a new teammate that solves an issue within their kit. Changli, on release, was mainly good for Encore teams, but as time went on, she gained a multitude of new synergies that she could take great advantage of. Changli outcomps, Carlotta quick swap, Phoebe teams, and then more recently, Brent comps. She has so many teams now, and if you're able to take advantage of swap windows, then you get rewarded quite handsomely performance-wise. Or should I say beautifully, seeing as we're talking about the lovely Phoenix Lady. Jojo was already a great character pre-Carlotta, because she was excellent for Jitchi teams. However, once the esteemed Montelli Lady was released, she shot up to become one of this game's most valuable meta characters in my opinion. The strength of the synergy between these two is utterly undeniable. There's also Yinling gaining Shangli Yao, meaning that she wouldn't be tied to the brick that is called Charo. Plus, at any time, Kuro can go back and add busted supports for older units that they want to shine the spotlight on again. If Kuro felt like putting Jinchi back on top again, stick a spectral flavored Jojo into the game. This is one of the most direct ways that you can buff older characters. However, since most supports tend to be limited 5-star characters, it's definitely the least accessible way. I do hope Kuro perhaps considers tapping into some more good 4-star supports. To me, this is all really cool stuff. It means that game balance is constantly on Kuro's mind. There's no truly bad limited 5-star DPS in this game. I specify limited because I seriously don't know if they ever have plans to try help out Lingyang and Colcharo. I kinda doubt it. At least Encore's really good. But for the limited DPSs, they'll always make sure that they're well taken care of. And when it comes to supports or second slot teammates, even the quote-unquote lower value ones such as Yinlin and Roshia still have their rightful place in this game. Yinlin's great for casual Shangli out teams, and while Roshia is not all that useful in TOA outside of freeing up Sanhua, she has her place in Whimpering Wastes. Kuro is never going to release a limited 5-star character and then completely forget about them. Even if they consider characters to be finished gear-wise, they somehow still find a way to lift them up. Such as Gion getting Nightmare Philly and Berengal. You can pull for basically any limited 5-star based on your personal preferences, and be assured that they will be usable ages from now. To be fair, the game is still less than a year old. I can't comment on whether these units will have a shelf life beyond a year or more, because we quite literally aren't at that stage yet. However, I do believe that a character should last at least 6 months before reaching a state where they feel bad to play. Gion released all the way back at 1.0 as this game's first banner, and that guy still feels good to play, even in TOA. It's a very healthy situation, in which everybody is reasonably viable, while still having a cast of all-stars that are a cut above the rest. And in situations where perhaps certain characters might feel a little weaker than others, Kuro will make sure to buff them up again. I'm a big Gion enjoyer, and Changli is one of my favorite characters, so it makes me super happy to see that they haven't been left behind in favor of new units. No, instead they shine like gold, with reasonable boosts to their pull value being added in 2.x. I don't know if Kuro hired some really good playtesters, or if they're simply fantastic at game balancing, but the way that they handle their meta feels extremely refreshing to me. This also makes new characters more exciting in turn, because they might work with some of the old favorites that you've already built up well, or could serve as a reason to unbench some random character that you've been ignoring for a while. These were all small things that I picked up on while playing. It's super cool that my Changli feels so strong right now after Brant's release, yet she still works so well independently of him. No unit is a requirement for any other unit to work, no matter how busted their kit may be. Seriously, all very well handled in my opinion. My only critique? Just add some more 4 stars of good kits, so that we don't end up fighting over Sanhua for every free-to-play team. Otherwise, peak balancing. At least from my perspective, I'm not a game designer or anything, but my experience with the meta has been simply brilliant due to all of these small things. But what do you think about all of this? Do you still think that Crow's balancing could be better, or are you also happy with how they handle things? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturday, starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to tell you how Wuthering Waves manages to keep old units feeling meta. This has been Juice, signing out, and seriously, Crow, your balancing is amazing, but can you please save Colcharo from the coal mines?